I'm Elizabeth Henson. Welcome to the Messy Success Podcast, where I'm helping creative dreamers and overachievers tackle business and life. After 6 years of being my own boss, I finally unraveled a tiny bit of what it takes to survive in this amazing world of being an overly creative entrepreneur. I'm your business bestie, here to help you with all those big ideas and to normalize some of the day-to-day struggles that we all share. My mission is simple. I want more women to make a living doing what they love and to feel good about themselves in the process. The best way to start? We can't do it alone. So welcome. I hope you'll hang out with me here where it's totally okay to be messy. Hello. Welcome back, you guys. I'm Elizabeth Henson, the host of the Messy Success Podcast. I'm so excited to be here this week. I've probably mentioned to you guys that we're in the process of moving my office at home so that we can make room for the baby. And my husband recently gave me permission to get a new desktop computer. So I get so excited now when I podcast because I can have more than one screen open at a time. So I can be recording in GarageBand on my left side, and then on my right side, I have my notes. I don't have to click back and forth anymore. Life is good. In the Henson office. You guys are going to love this episode because I'm going to be sharing all the dirt about my 15-hour work week and how I managed to run a photography business, 2 membership programs, and my podcast in 15 hours a week. And I've shared about this before, especially if you listen to my 10x your productivity episode, but this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to really dig into 4 key components that help me get all of my work done in 15 hours. You might have also heard that I'm hosting a free workshop on this that is happening Thursday, the same day that this podcast goes live. But guess what? This has been such an in-demand topic that no matter when you're listening to the podcast, you'll be able to head over to the show notes and get access to the actual replay of the virtual workshop that goes along with this episode, where I'm going to be having a PowerPoint presentation and slides, and people are there live. So I definitely want to encourage you to go make sure that you get access to that workshop if you love this episode. This is going to be the Cliff Notes version, but we're going to be digging into real life examples and hopefully digging into some other people's businesses as well during the workshop so that you can see other examples besides just mine and just the kind of bullet point abbreviated version. So definitely head over there and sign up for that before you listen or after you listen. It doesn't matter, but that will be at elizabethhensonphotos.com/37. Okay, so let's dive right into the good stuff. We're going to be talking about my 15-hour work week. And the first thing I wanted to do is a few myth busters, okay? So I think there's a huge misconception out there that Elizabeth Henson works a lot. And I think that that misconception is because I love to work. I love to talk about work. I love to share about what I'm working on. I love to create new programs. I love to serve my people. The things that I do in my business bring me so much joy. It's like my hobby and my serenity and my happiness all in one place. So naturally, I talk about it a lot, but in the reality of it, the time that I'm spending physically working behind my computer, physically in my office, is only about 15 hours a week on a typical Monday through Friday week. So I'm going to dig into that in a little bit about how flexible is that 15 hours, but let's talk about these myth busters first. So the first myth is that I work a lot. The second myth is that you have to get up early in the morning or work late at night. If you are, a work from home entrepreneur, whatever, there's all these things out there that say, every successful entrepreneur gets up early in the morning. And that is not always true. In fact, I don't do early mornings. I wish I did. And I do have seasons where it comes easily to me. But as you guys know, I'm pregnant with my third baby. And right now I am not doing mornings. I mean, I barely even have time to do an email sweep a lot of mornings. I will sometimes on Thursday mornings get up just to be sure that the podcast is ready to go live, but that's a 10 to 15 minute process. It's not anything that I'm having to, time block for or anything. But I, in particular, don't do early mornings. I don't do late nights. I have worked hard to make my business fit my life and not my life fit my business. The next myth is that you have to have very rigid lists or processes. And I am type B. I am your example of messy success. I do not have strict lists or strict rules or color-coded charts. I don't have any of that. And then also that you have to batch work and do everything ahead of time. Now, of course, I am going to tell you that is the best way to do things, but I do not. I work mostly in real time. Hence, I'm recording this podcast episode on Tuesday and it will go live on Thursday. And my Instagram, everybody's like, plan your 30 days of content in 1 hour and have your Instagram content ready to go. And I admire people who do that. I truly do, but I do not. I work in real time. I like to always speak from a place of inspiration and authenticity and real time, what's going on in my life. And I just I'm not built to do things super far ahead of time. And I really beat myself up about that for a long time. And I was really trying to fit, my square peg self into a round hole. Well, this is what everyone else is doing, so that's what I need to be doing. And that's not always the case. And, the more that I am looking up to other online entrepreneurs, I realize that a lot of them work in real time too. And of course, there's systems in place to make sure that all of this runs smoothly in real time. But that doesn't mean that we all have to function from this place of pre-planning our content to the max, right? I woke up this morning and I honestly wasn't even sure what I was going to podcast about today. And of course, I looked at my, everything that's going on this week. And I felt like, what? It just makes sense to go ahead and do this episode about my 15-hour work week, especially since we have a workshop around it this week. Why not time it up? But I could have changed my mind. I could have woken up and said, what? I want to podcast about something else today. And I'm not going to tell you that that's the best way to do things, but it works for me. And if you find yourself really preferring to do things in real time, really preferring to have flexibility, maybe you don't want to work early mornings, maybe that doesn't fit for you in your life, give yourself permission to be you, because the more you that you can be, the better you are going to run your business. So don't make the same mistake that I did of feeling like a failure because I didn't have this perfectly planned out content calendar. And I still don't. I still do not have a content calendar. And I remember 3 years ago sitting down with a business coach, help me create a content calendar. And it just didn't work, right? So why should we force ourselves to do something that doesn't work for our business? Okay. Now that doesn't mean that my way is the best way. It doesn't mean I'm moving the needle in my business as fast as other people, but this is what works for me and what works for my life. So if you can take away any golden nugget from this episode, let it be to create your work around your life and not your life around your work. And you're going to actually see more success because you're operating from a better place. Okay, so now we're going to break this down into 4 key components that make up my ability, my system for being able to only work 15 hours a week. Now, of course, you guys know I'm a wedding photographer, so there are some weekends that I am shooting, 8 to 10 hours in one day. So those weeks are obviously a little different. I don't shoot that many weddings anymore. I think I have 6 more for the year, and then my team has a couple. But I will say, if you're listening and you're a photographer, maybe you don't have all these different buckets that I have. And if I was just a wedding photographer and I shot a wedding for 8 hours on Saturday, I would be able to take off Thursday and Friday, and I could still have everything I need to do for my wedding workflow done on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay. So I could still fit my 15 hours in if I had to around, 8 hours happening on a Saturday. So I don't want you guys to listen to this and say, this doesn't apply to me because I shoot weddings and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I shoot weddings too. And I choose to still work 15 hours Monday through Friday because I'm operating 2 membership sites and a podcast. But if I was just a photographer, I could turn that around in the same amount of time, no problem, and then take Thursday and Friday off if I wanted to. So yes, there are some weeks where I work more, but that's because I choose to maintain this Monday through Friday schedule that I love so much. And that includes some of my photography work, obviously. Okay, so let's break it down into the 4 components. Let me tell you a little bit about my day first. Let's do that first. Okay. A typical Monday through Friday for Liz Henson, my kids go to school from 9:30 to 1. And most of the time I'm doing the picking up and the dropping off. So that means my actual work time is about 10 to 12:40. So 2 hours and 40 minutes of what I call my zone of genius time. And I'm going to get to that when we get to our four pillars. And that's when I do my core work. So any content that I need to create for my memberships or the podcast, some photography work does get done during that time if I need to. But it's very, very strict. That is my zone of genius time. That is when I am pumping out work. Okay. Then I pick up my kids at 1. We come home. My youngest takes a nap. My oldest sometimes has quiet time. I used to be really strict about actually working in the afternoon, but I don't anymore. With my pregnancy, I learned to give myself grace, take some naps here and there. And my oldest one is requiring a little bit more out of me, and I decided I didn't want to force myself to sit at the laptop and, have her self-entertain for that large of a window of time. So that's really like Henson flexibility time now from, that 1:30 to 5 o'clock time when my husband gets home. And I might do low maintenance tasks like emails that are not urgent or, something like that. But I really don't include that in my 15 hours because I'm not always working then. I like to, be a mom and do things around the house. I don't know what I do because y'all know I struggle with the house stuff too. Okay. Anyway, then my husband comes home around 5 and then I either have a coaching call in the evening or I spend time with my family. I mean, there's really very little that is happening during that time now too, unless I have a photo shoot, or like I said, I do some of my coaching calls in the evenings, but that's just an hour, typically about once a week. I'm doing that. So that's kind of my typical Monday through Friday. It does change based on photo shoots or what I have going on that week. But I would say for the most part, like 95% of my work is getting done from that 10 o'clock to 12:40 time frame, which sounds insane when I even say it out loud, but it's absolutely true with some very light like email sweeps or tasks happening outside of that. Okay, now let's get into our 4 pillars. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is clarity. So the biggest thing that I see, the more clear that I am around my goals and around what I'm working on, and when I post in my groups or when I ask my clients, or my students, like, what are you working on this week? They don't know this, but I'm actually looking at their goals, trying to see who's setting really clear ones, right? And an example of a goal that's not super clear would be if I say, okay, what are you working on tomorrow? Well, tomorrow I'm going to work on my website. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, I'm just going to update my website. I need to do some stuff. Okay. So then I would imagine that this person, they sit at their desk and they're going to work on their website, and they kind of piddle around, maybe update some pictures, maybe update the about page. But like, there's not been a clear, like, finished line, right? Like, we have to have a clear finish line. So a better example of that same goal would be tomorrow from 10 to 12, I'm going to work on my website and I'm going to update my about page. I am going to create a new X, Y, and Z page. And then I'm going to have a friend read over everything. And then I'm done. That's all I'm doing tomorrow. Now, if you do more, great, right? Bonus points when we get to do more. But you need to give yourself a finish line, because what happens is when we say blanket statements like, I'm just going to work on my website, there's no finish line. So you're either going to spend way too much time dilly-dallying, looking at it, playing on it, not really sure what you got done, or you may skip over it altogether because you're not really clear. So you're kind of swirling around with what you're actually going to accomplish. But we want that finish line so we have that sense of accomplishment. So like, how clear can you be with yourself of what you're going to get done? Like, what specific task for your website are you going to get done? And when are you going to do it, right? And like I said, I enjoy flexibility. So I knew that today was Tuesday, but I was very clear in that I will record a podcast episode. Okay. I will record this podcast episode start to finish. Then I'm going to send it to my podcast editor. And when she gets it back to me, then I'm going to send it to my blogging assistant who gets the show notes ready. So that is very specific from getting from point A to point D of when that task is complete, right? So it's very clear what I need to get done. Now, because I love white space and I love flexibility, that was my only urgent action item on my schedule today. And my podcast only takes about an hour. So that means out of my 2 hours and 45 minutes, I still have white space. So I'm able to be in the front end of my business. I can be inside my membership groups, hanging out with my members, which is my favorite thing to do. I can be in my Instagram stories. I can be, business chatting with my people on Voxer. To me, those are important things that they do make it into my zone of genius time. I'm also getting ready for a virtual workshop that we're having on Thursday. So I was able to kill two birds with one stone and create the notes for this podcast episode, which will then be implemented and expanded into my PowerPoint. So I'm kind of getting ahead on that as well. But that was my big action item on my agenda today. And then my leftover hour and 40 minutes, I'm able to check off other things that I'm also being really specific about, but they might not be as time sensitive or whatever it might be. So we have to be extremely clear with ourselves. And yes, sometimes that starts with 90-day goals. So I do typically know the big rocks, the big projects that I want to get done in a quarter. So in a 90-day time frame. So I know that each quarter this year, we are running a launch for the Shine the Light Society. So that's a big piece, right? So then I'm always working backwards or working in tandem with my project manager on what needs to be done for that, right? But there's a deadline, there's an item in my calendar of when those are going to happen. So you have to be clear. You have to give yourself deadlines. So if you're working on a new project or you're working on getting your website launched, maybe you want to open an Etsy shop, put that in your calendar. What's the worst case scenario? You change it, big deal, right? So put it in your calendar when you want your website done. Put it in your calendar when you want to launch that Etsy workshop. But if we continue to just say, oh, well, I'm going to work on this with no true deadlines, clarity around it, we're going to be in this state of, I don't want to say lacking productivity, but there's no clear finish line. We don't get to check that box that it's done. And then if you overachieve, maybe you say, I'm just going to do my about page, but maybe you finish 5 pages. That's like pat yourself on the back. You get bonus points, right? And then you can take those off of your to-do list later. But I can't enforce this enough, that just being super clear on what exactly you want to get done and when you want to have it done. And the smaller window of time you can give yourself, the better. Because I actually see the people who struggle the most tend to be the people that have the most time. Because instead of saying, okay, I'm going to sit at my desk from 9:30 to 11:30, they're like, okay, I'll get it done tomorrow, right? Like, get it done between 9:30 and 11:30 so you can go to yoga at noon, or you can go take the dogs for a walk at 2. And it doesn't have to be strict. It doesn't have to be perfect. But we have to be very clear what we're going to do and when we're going to get it done, right? Even if you're like me and you work in real time, a little bit last minute, that is better than just saying, I'm going to work on blank that has no finish line. So give yourself a finish line for every single task. Okay, that was a bit of a rabbit hole. The second component is budgeting your time. Okay, now I know that's kind of a big one, but my schedule was set for me, right? So my kids go to school from 9:30 to 1. So that part was set for me. I can't really control that. But luckily, that aligns with when I feel like I'm very productive. I mean, I would like to get my day started earlier. 8 o'clock would be fabulous, but their school starts at 9:30. So that was set for me. So I know that for me to have uninterrupted work hours, it has to be during that time frame. So I always budget my projects and my time to fit in that window. And now, like I said before, I've even mastered including white space in that time. And that took me a long time because it's so easy for us to overbook. It's so easy for us to be like, sure, I'll shoot 5 nights a week. But then there's no way that my workload could fit into those 15 hours that I was uninterrupted. So I was miserable because I was taking on too much work that couldn't fit into my work hours. So now I'm working outside of my work hours. I'm miserable because, I'm like neglecting my kids, or I'm waking up early, or I'm in my office late at night, whatever. So we have to not only budget the time that we're working, but we have to budget the amount of client work that we take on, the amount of photo shoots that you take on, the amount of products that you're going to sell that you take on. And that has to fit with the amount of hours that you want to work. And we're going to talk about this at the end, but if you're in a stage of hustle, you might need to work 40 hours a week. It might look different than like what I'm doing. But those two things have to make sense. So you can't listen to this and say, gosh, I really want to work 15 hours a week, but I'm not willing to give up my 45 weddings a year or shooting, 5 nights a week. If you're going to take on that amount of client work, you may not realistically be able to turn it around in a 15-hour work week unless you start outsourcing, which we're going to talk about that too. Okay. So the budgeting the time, if you have too much time, maybe you don't have kids yet, you don't have a day job, you're literally just working from home, give yourself a finish line and an actual time block to do your work. And I know that's difficult when it's so flexible. Like my container of time was created for me. I have no choice but to make that work, but try to give yourself at least a clear finish line so that you can enjoy your day and you're not constantly overworking or kind of spinning your wheels. All right. The third thing is protecting your zone of genius time. Okay. So that means for me, that's that 10 o'clock to 12:40. That is when my kids are at school. So that is what I call my zone of genius, meaning I have no interruptions. This is when the meat and potatoes of my business have to happen. And then bump the small stuff. And by the small stuff, I mean emails that are not super time sensitive. Something that doesn't take a lot of brain power. So for me, sometimes I actually will edit my photos outside of that 15-hour work week because I can edit fast. I can multitask, listen to a podcast, listen to a course. I can actually do two things at once, so that time is actually being used from a different container. So, I allow myself to read. I allow myself to listen to podcasts. I allow myself to, do educational things for my business. And if I can listen to those while I'm editing and doing client work, then that editing doesn't have to take up my zone of genius time, my 15 hours, right? And I mean, I've been doing this for over 6 years now, so I'm very efficient with my processes and my workflows for that. But you have to really protect that zone of genius time. Don't book a lunch date, every other day that's with the few hours that you have, unencumbered. Like, be disciplined with yourself that this is your most uninterrupted time. This is your most productive time. Like, turn on all your do not disturbs and do the tasks that you need to do and hit the finish line that you set. Okay. And then really set things in place to protect this zone of genius time. And a long-term vision that my project manager, Jess, and I have is that, she will be the protector of my zone of genius, and everybody on my team will eventually, be reporting to her instead of having to report to me, so that is even less interruptions during my zone of genius time. Future goals, right? So protect that time and then bump the small stuff. Don't use those nice, beautiful time blocks to do small tasks that can be done, multitasked or in a 15-minute window in a different part of your day. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And then the last component that I want to talk about is outsourcing, because outsourcing is like this big scary thing and everyone thinks it's so expensive or you have to be like so far along in your business to outsource, and that's not the case, okay? There are ways now that you can get help in your business for amazingly affordable prices. There is Upwork, where you can find people online to be some type of virtual assistant or whatever you might need. There's onlinejobs.ph, where you can hire people in the Philippines to do things for you. I had a photo editor for a little while in the Philippines, and it was a fraction of what it cost editors in the United States. There's so many ways to outsource that they don't have to be expensive, right? And I know that we think, well, if I can just do it myself, I'll get to keep the money. But if you're making, 100 or 200, however much you're making, say you're a photographer, taking pictures, right? But you're spending another hour or two editing the pictures, that you could actually be paying someone significantly less to do than what you're charging yourself or your client, right? Then you could take on an extra photo shoot and make more. So a lot of it is like that mindset shift of like, where are we spending our time that we could be having someone else do? So my podcast is such a great example, and my podcast editor is amazing and so sweet. Her name is Leonie. And, editing my podcast didn't take me long, like at all. I could have them completely turned around in an hour, right? But then I started to think, well, like I'm getting kind of tired of the editing process. I really just want to record these things and pass them on. And it's not something that's difficult, but if I can send it to her and she puts it together for me at a price that I feel amazingly blessed, to be able to spend, I get an hour back. And an hour went out of my 15 hours of my zone of genius time is huge. And podcasting is more difficult for me to fit in outside of my 15 hours because I don't want my kids in the house. Even if I'm just editing, I want to be able to have my headphones on and re-record if I need to. And then I'll kind of nitpick myself, right? Like a lot of tasks end up taking us so much longer than they really need to because we're going to overthink things. And, when I was editing my own podcast, I would catch myself, oh, well, let me fix that part. And then 15 minutes later because I couldn't get it to fit in the spot just right or whatever it might be, it's like it didn't make sense when I can pass it on to Leonie, who does this professionally and better than me. And then I'm not overthinking anything. She's going to put the pieces together for me. And that's going to give me an hour back of my time that I can be using to serve my members, to serve my clients, to be on the front end of my business where I'm making new audience, connections, where I'm fostering relationships. That is time such better spent than an hour that I can be outsourcing for, a fraction of the price of what I would charge myself for an hour of work, right? So sometimes we just have to really assess, is it worth it? And, a lot of online CEOs will say we shouldn't do anything that's repeatable. Like we, as the visionary of our business, we really shouldn't be doing any repeatable tasks. But I know not everyone is in that space in their business where they have a team. And I know that that's a slow climb and that's a process. But it all boils down to what kind of life do you want to live? Where do you want to spend your time? And I knew I don't want to work more than 15 hours because I'm tired of cramming it in, overlapping with my family time. I want to fit it in the 15 hours. And then anything else that I do is bonus. That's icing on the cake. That's great. But I know that I want to be able to maintain my photography business, my memberships, and my podcast in 15 hours. And hiring amazing people like Leonie has helped me do that. And I get an entire hour back. And days like today, I said I had an hour and 40 minutes of white space. That's incredible. Okay. So outsourcing doesn't have to be out of reach. It doesn't have to be expensive. And again, the clarity piece. So I tried hiring so many times in the past and it failed miserably because I wasn't clear. But then I got really clear. Okay, I want to record my podcast and I want to pass it on to someone else. Okay, so it was very clear of what I want Leonie to do and when I need it back. And that makes it so much easier for everybody involved. But I used to just kind of like I hired a project manager once and I was so confused on what I wanted her to do or what she was supposed to do, right? Because I wasn't clear myself. So the outsourcing becomes easier when you've become more clear with your goals, your finish lines, your deadlines, and what those tasks look like, right? The systems. So outsourcing is a big piece, but with the outsourcing is what I was talking about earlier, which is like you might be in a stage of hustle, right? Like when I first started my photography business, I was overworking and barely making any money, but I was doing what I had to do, to get my name out there, to get the clients, to get the bookings so that I could slowly raise my prices. And then we reach a second stage where we're still kind of overworking, but at least now we're making profit, right? So that would be me in like 2016. Like I'm still way overshooting, way overworking, but at least now I see a profit. And then we reach a third stage, which is like, okay, now my business is successful. How can I scale that back so that I can have a little bit more life with a little bit less hustle, right? So if you're in that stage of hustle, you're in that business building stage, you might not be ready for the outsourcing because you're not going to be super clear yet, but keep working towards it. And you can always work on scaling back your wasted time, scaling back your wasted energy, scaling back what my friends and I sometimes call like being a squirrel, right? Where you're just like distracted by all the things. You can always hone in on those skills and you can always do better at that. But I know not everybody listening to this is going to be in a place in their business where they can scale back and they can outsource. But just know that it doesn't always have to be expensive and you can start small with one person. My Leslie, my virtual assistant who does the show notes, right? She's been working for me for a while now. And I just give her that one simple task, whether it's a wedding blog or the podcast show notes, she does that one simple task. And I'm very clear about what I need and when I need it by. So it's a very easy to maintain relationship. And it doesn't always have to, cost what, the big wigs are going to tell you need to pay. Like, it can be a normal person. Leslie was one of my brides. And it's such a blessing to me to be able to bless her family, right? Like, I love hiring people because I get to look in the mirror and say, my business is blessing other families, even if it's small, right? What planner company is it that has all the work from home moms? I think it's Inkwell Press, who, when you email them with a question, they're like, we employ stay-at-home moms, so please be flexible with our 24-hour turnaround time or something like that. And I was like, that is so cool that their business gets to help these moms stay home with their kids. Like, that's amazing. That really inspired me to want to hire more when I read that. So outsourcing doesn't have to be painful. You get to create what it looks like. You get to set the tone of what you're able and willing to pay. But then obviously take good care of your people. If they're doing a good job, take good care of your people. But anyway, that's the one myth thing that I did want to bust, is that it doesn't have to cost a lot. You can start small with one simple task and work your way up from there. But I do want to encourage you, if you can pay someone significantly less and get yourself back more time, that is money well spent, right? Because you can be spending that time doing more revenue generating activities, right? For me, recording the podcast is great. That's important. But all the other pieces of putting it together that will take me so much longer than it will take Leonie, I can do something else that's revenue generating while she is doing that task. And that is such a beautiful thing. So big shout out to my team. They are all so amazing. We've got some really exciting things happening behind the scenes this year with my team and with the growth, and my project manager, Jessica, who's kind of stepping up into an integrator. It's a really, really beautiful and exciting year for us. So thank you guys for that, because I know they're all going to listen at some point. All right. So just be sure that you're clear about whether you're in a stage of hustle or whether you're getting closer to that stage of wanting to scale back. But don't feel like you can't have both. Don't feel like you can't hustle in a limited space of time, okay? But that's going to look different for everyone. So give yourself grace. Let's circle back to the point that I made in the very beginning of, this is your work schedule, right? This is your routine, like creating work around your life and not life around your work. And you get to decide what that looks like. So don't, be a square peg trying to fit in that round hole if you don't work that way. So be really true to yourself of what makes you feel successful so that you can spend more time in that space, and be really clear on what you're going to get done and when you're going to do it. And I promise, if you can start setting more clear goals that you can actually check the box, you're going to see so much more productivity than just the fluffy goals, right? Okay. And then budgeting your time, right? Budget the things that you want to do too. Budget that Jen time, budget the yoga time, budget the reading, the sitting by the pool. That all counts. That's all important. The self-care. Protecting your zone of genius. Bump the small stuff that can be done in a 10 to 15 minute window and protect those big chunks of time. And then the outsourcing. So I hope this was helpful. This was, like I said, the Cliff Notes version. I hope that you'll go sign up for the workshop. And then you can get the slide deck and real life examples, a little bit more hands-on, all the visual things if you're a visual person. But either way, thank you guys so much for listening to all the nitty-gritty to my 15-hour work week and how I make that happen and what that looks like. It's not perfect, it's flexible, but it totally works for me, and it brings me so much joy to be able to have the white space, to be able to spend the time serving my members of the communities and all that good stuff, dreaming big. I like to actually have time to dream. And like I said, the show notes will be at elizabethhensonphotos.com/37, and you can get access to everything you need right there. All right. Thank you guys. Have a good one. And I will see you next week for another episode of the Messy Success Podcast. If you love this episode, share it with a friend, share it online, leave us a review on iTunes. I don't give you guys enough shout outs for doing that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll try to remember to even come on here and read some of them live because I've had some really good comments over the last 6 months. We're almost at a year on the podcast. We'll have to do something special to celebrate that. But thank you guys. Definitely share it with your friends. Leave us a review. Say hi. Let us know how you're doing and if you love the podcast. And thank you so much for listening. I know this was a big, juicy episode. All right. We'll see you guys next week.